Another Christmas, another Queen's speech, and another 10-minute TV broadcast from Her Majesty Elizabeth II, once again talking about her joys and family affairs throughout 2018. She talked of Prince Harry's royal wedding with the American actress Meghan Markle, while falling short of slightest hint about his hefty cost to the British taxpayers. The royal wedding was justified as value to the economy. Despite its details still being shrouded in secrecy, the estimated £32 million wedding was almost 60% higher than William's wedding in 2011 and roughly 1,000 times more than the cost of an average wedding. Just outside the royal family's castles and palaces, Britons were facing the reality of their lives. While the media, in particular BBC, was over-obsessed with the aristocratic wealth, millions of Britons' benefit payments were stopped and political uncertainty over Brexit pushed the lives of millions of Britons to the cliff edge.
People have seen their energy costs go up, food prices have increased by about 40%, rents are going up. So broadly, people are earning less and having to pay out more. And on top of that, something we're really concerned about are the cuts that we've seen to the social security safety net, which have been implemented in the last few years. And about 50% of people who come to food banks do so because of problems with the benefit system.
Britain should now embrace for a deteriorating economic outlook whatever the Brexit scenarios would be. Official figures prove that Britain would be poorer under any form of Brexit deal. Britons who are already witnessing the British currency drop in value should expect greater impacts which would directly affect their lives. They will also suffer from a rare level of inflation in the months and years to come. The cost of public finances could be up to 1.8% of GDP under the Prime Minister's deal or 3.1% in a no-deal scenario. Income per capita would fall by more than 1.5% in the UK under the terms of the withdrawal agreement and almost 3.5% with no deal. The cost to the Treasury from reduced revenues such as taxes would be 0.4% to 1.8% of GDP under Mrs May's deal and 1% to 3.1% with no deal.
More people in this country are living in poverty, including 500,000 more children since 2010. The government should be ashamed of themselves for that. Poverty is rising, homelessness is rising, household debt is rising too.
Well, all in all, I found 2018 to be another sombre year. What we saw in Britain in 2018 was growing inequality and growing poverty. We now have 14 million Britons living in poverty. We now have 4 million children living below the breadline in the UK. And we have millions of British people dependent on food banks, which means they do not have money to buy food for themselves. So they are dependent on churches and charities to provide food for them.
But the economy was just a tiny part of the bigger problem. The British society is also rolling down the hill. According to the Red Crescent, of the 66 million Britons crammed in the island, almost 9 million people feel often or always lonely. Reports also suggest that around 200,000 elderly Britons had not had a conversation with a friend or relative in over a month. While loneliness is now regarded as an epidemic health risk factor in Britain, the level of mental health is much higher than those simply being alone. Roughly 1 in 4 adults in Britain experience mental illness at some point. These mental conditions often start during childhood, however economic and social situations intensify the problem while the government lags behind the targets of dealing with the issue. In addition, research shows that 10% of school children aged between 5 and 16 have been diagnosed with a mental health, with 75% of them not receiving treatment. The island, which was once regarded as a safe haven for children, is now red-flagged when it comes to child safety. According to the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, kids are being sexually abused every 8 minutes in England and Wales.
They confirm that 1 in 4 children, 1 in 4, 25% of our child population is abused in this country. It's totally unacceptable. The fact that 3/4 managed to make it through childhood relatively unscathed is good, but it's a national scandal that we allow this to go on, and we need a national or a royal, I've said it before, we need a royal commission with survivor involvement, full survivor involvement, chaired by somebody trusted by people within the survivor world.
Boys as young as 12 are prosecuted for rapes in London, simply blackmailing victims into sex in the so-called revenge porn phenomena. Meanwhile, kids as young as 10 are now being recruited by criminal gangs simply because police cannot prosecute them. The latest figures by TUC Union indicates that the number of children growing up in poverty in working households was 1 million, 50% more or higher in 2018 than in 2010. According to the analysis carried out for the TUC by Landman Economics, 3.1 million children with working parents were below the official breadline in 2018, compared to 2.1 million at the start of the decade.
We're now beginning to understand the issues of trafficking, of gang involvement, of sexual exploitation, online grooming, whole systems of behaviours that are affecting not just individual children but thousands of children. And this really is going to require quite a different way of thinking about how we protect children, which is we've got to work much more closely together, we've got to share information together, and we've got to find ways of understanding and analysing it on that whole society level, not just the individual child or family level, which is how our systems are set up at the moment.
Child abuse was not restricted to the criminal gangs. Reports suggested in 2018 that children as young as 16 were systematically recruited to spy in covert operations aimed at terrorists, gangs and drug dealers. The British spy agency's appetite to recruit juvenile spies was not restricted to indigenous British children only. The MI6 scrapped a rule in 2018 that new recruits must have 2 British-born parents, and the children of immigrants will also be targeted by the MI6's recruitment agencies. It was also revealed that UK is the only country in Europe to recruit soldiers at 16. Would-be recruits can now apply to join the British Army when they are only 15 years and 7 months old.
In Britain, the cost of living is going up. Utility bills are going up. Violent crime is on the increase. And what we really need now are protests, peaceful, law-abiding protests, mass protests in London and in other British cities, for example, Manchester or Glasgow, in order to say to the British government that enough is enough, that we can no longer keep on suffering at the hands of these private companies which are exploiting us. I myself am not optimistic that things will change, because there will only be change if there are mass protests.